To be honest, my very first motivation was to keep him out of jail. I'm not sure that that's legal. We were banned from advertising online. So we couldn't advertise on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram.
How come?
Google Ads. He taught himself how to code, and within 5 days he had built the first version of the website. We just were super lean and we automated everything.
This is Janine Grainger,
co-founder of Easy Crypto, from $0 to $4 billion traded, acquired by Swyftx, built on compliance, speed and audacity.
You wanted to grow Easy Crypto to $1 billion company. Did you get there at the end?
Not yet. We recently merged or were acquired by Swyftx in Australia, and they are on track to becoming $1 billion company, a unicorn. We had almost $4 billion of sales. I can't disclose the deal terms. This impetus to become an overnight expert. We just built it. We believed in doing that from day one.
Did you struggle with imposter syndrome quite a lot?
And I still do a bit. I'm not techie enough. I'm not foundery enough. I'm not crypto enough. I'm not enough. Everyone has imposter syndrome. Looking at how far you've come and sort of allowing yourself to bake in the learnings.
Quick one, Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay. Back to the episode. Janine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You wanted to start $1 billion company back in the day, and we're going to get into that. I want to know did you get there at the end?
Not yet, but the journey's still going. So we recently merged or were acquired by Swyftx in Australia, and they are on track to becoming $1 billion company, a unicorn. And so we're part of that journey still.
The reason why I asked that question is because there was a big vision that you had, and you had a lot of sales. How much sale did you make at the end with Easy Crypto?
Yeah, so to date we've done almost $4 billion of crypto trading just in the New Zealand market, and more globally. So yeah, it's a big volume.
It is huge volume, and you ought to be proud of that.
Thanks.
So I like to talk to my guests and get to know the background, but in a way that has never been told before. And so I always kind of like to ask, what sort of oven were you cooked in to be able to come up with $1 billion valuation to a company before you've even started, and to have that audaciousness to even think that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, sort of what shapes us and what builds us to the people we are. I think one of the things that probably helped for me to be able to create Easy Crypto, probably there was a stage in my childhood and then a stage in my early career as well. So I'll talk about both of those. But in our childhood, we grew up sort of at varying stages. Like my parents almost faced bankruptcy when we were younger. We weren't very wealthy when we were young, but my parents always taught us the value of money, and things like we might get 20 cents as pocket money and we would have saved some of it, and that kind of idea of always putting something away for the future, always looking towards the future and how you can create a better future for yourself. So understanding how money worked was really formative for me as a child. And then I actually dropped out of high school, which is probably another formative experience. And my parents were very much of the view that, we were smart kids, we worked hard. It didn't matter if we had an official, university degree or had finished high school, we'd be able to make our way in the world, and that there are lots of different career paths open, which I think was a really, an unusual perspective perhaps, but one that, meant that I was okay to drop out of school. It let me explore different career opportunities. And I ended up working in a range of different jobs, from everything from local government through to major events, through to management consulting, and learned all of these different skills at all of those jobs that I really recognised in, I guess, the third phase of my life, the Easy Crypto phase, that I'd learnt all of these quite different and quite varied skills through those different roles, but all of these threads which pulled together really made a useful background for CEO of a crypto business.
It's crazy. What a story. And I love you. I heard somewhere that you felt like you're a natural entrepreneur, like you kind of didn't fit with the school system for a start. You didn't feel like you connected? Because a lot of people who listen to the podcast who are aspiring entrepreneurs, like a 22-year-old, thinking, did I make the wrong choice by not staying at school? Did I make the right choice by dropping out? What do you say to that 22-year-old?
I think there's genuinely no one right path, right? And even for us as individuals, like I could have chosen a dozen different paths, which, many of them still would have ended up here. I think the more important thing is to, follow what feels right for you and sort of trust that you will, my career was such a meandering journey. There was no clear outcome to it, but I kept following things that, two principles. One, am I interested in it? And two, is it going to challenge and grow me? And if something ticked those boxes, I'd go for it. And I say that now with hindsight. At the time, I was just like, oh, that. But I think those were the key ingredients, was challenge and passion. Because if you have passion, it can, see you through the hard times. And if you're getting challenged, then you're advancing yourself. And those, I think, are the two really important things to look for.
Yeah, and with passion and challenge, did that come up naturally for you? Or did you have, you're passionate already? You have passion running through your veins for business, for finance, like the self-motivation or the willingness to keep going, and also the willing and wanting to be challenged. So that's something that, do you think, naturally came for you? Or is it something that developed? The passion developed, the passion grew, the desire for being challenged developed and grew?
It's an interesting one. I'm not sure I know the answer, but I think that, I genuinely believe, most of us, we go to work 8 hours a day, right? And no one wants to go to work and just feel like they're just hitting their head against a brick wall or just completely uninterested in it. So I think that idea of looking for a career or a job or a vocation that you enjoy turning up to work for, I think that's a pretty fundamental human desire. And I think it's really important to, no job's ever going to be ticking all the boxes and perfect, but at least have something that 80% of the time you're interested and engaged in is really a good thing. And then in terms of that challenge, I think that it's one of those muscles that you stretch, right? If you challenge yourself a bit, and actually I might just touch here on a bit of what I've learned about imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Because I think it's a really important topic for entrepreneurs, and actually anyone really, is what I found about challenge, resilience, and imposter syndrome is that they're all things that you can stretch and grow and build over time. And a really important part of that is looking at how far you've come and sort of allowing yourself to bake in the learnings and reinforce, hey, a year ago I was doing this. Now I'm doing something, that I never thought I could do a year ago, whether that be I did some public speaking or I built a product or I took on a bigger challenge at work. And just really taking time to reflect on that and let that reinforce your confidence for the next time. And that for me was a really big part of how I worked through imposter syndrome in particular.
Did you struggle with imposter syndrome quite a lot?
Massively. And I still do a bit, but I'm really, I try to really keep those learnings and practice what I preach and sort of go. I think it helps also to know that everyone has imposter syndrome.
Everyone does.
Everyone, yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
I always think who am I to do this?
Yeah, we all have that kind of I'm not good enough, or I'm not, for me with Easy Crypto, it started off with, I've never been a CEO. I've never even led people before. I'd never been a manager of any sort. I'm not techie enough. I'm not foundery enough. I'm not crypto enough. All of these things, I'm not enough.
Interesting.
But then I would look at, hey, actually, I taught these people this stuff about crypto, and actually I know more than most people do, or I learnt this skill because I sat down and applied myself, therefore I can grow and stretch and kind of, just really reinforcing with your psyche, because your psyche is skewed to go negative and to say you're not enough, and just to really reinforce it. Actually, this proof point, this one piece of data from last week, last month shows that I am. So let me remember that and move forward from there.
What got you interested into crypto? Why crypto?
So I first got involved in crypto about 2014. I remember coming across, at that stage it was Bitcoin, was sort of pretty much one of the only cryptos out there. And I came across it on an internet forum and just, remember thinking that it made a lot of sense. So, with the internet, we had this global village, we had global communications with email, but we didn't have any global payment system. So I bought a Bitcoin way back then just to understand how it worked. And I thought it would be the next big thing. I was like, we're on the precipice of this being everyone's using it all the time. And then nothing happened. And it wasn't until 2017, a couple of years later, that people started talking about Bitcoin and blockchain. And at that stage, I was working for a bank, and it came up in conversation that I had some Bitcoins, then everyone expected me to know stuff about it. And they'd all ask me their questions. I got nicknamed J-Coin in the bank. I was giving presentations to the bank and to customers around Bitcoin blockchain. And so it really sort of created this impetus to become an overnight expert. And this is one of the other things that I really believe is that you can become an overnight expert in anything. If the subject matter is small enough, you can be an expert, relatively quickly. And so because I knew more about crypto than anyone else, I was the person that everyone went to, which then meant I had to learn more because I needed to keep upskilling. And that was really, I guess, the very start of the origin story of Easy Crypto.
Very interesting. And what do you think about crypto now, that many years later? Do you still think it's the way to go?
Yeah, I think it is inevitable that our financial systems will digitize. So finance is still very much analog. There's a lot of paper-based things. There's a lot of manual data being entered. It's not, our money isn't programmable. And when you think about how much the world has changed with information going digital, with the internet, money and finance going digital is, I think, absolutely the next step. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. I think a lot of this will actually be invisible. So we'll have our national money, so like the New Zealand dollar, will go digital. Our banks will start running on digital rails. And a lot of this, you and I won't necessarily notice, but under the hood things will be digital, but we'll still be using money in similar ways. But the things that we will be able to do with money will become progressively much more advanced, and there'll be products, services, use cases that we can't even imagine today that digitization will unlock.
And what is it? Okay, I do want to ask about that, but we will get to the regulation and the future of crypto in a minute. I kind of given the listener a little bit of a sneak peek into what this might come up, but I'd love to get into the co-founder journey and when you were starting to think about disruption, because you have been dubbed a disruptor. What does that really mean if someone doesn't understand that term? What did you disrupt? And do you think do you think things have been disrupted in the crypto space, at least in New Zealand?
Yeah, I think, disruptor can mean all sorts of things. Typically it's around there's a status quo and then you come in and you do something different and it catches on, right? With us, when we started Easy Crypto, it was very hard to get cryptocurrency in New Zealand, but also it was very expensive. So the competitors that were here in market were charging around 15%, 15% markup, which for a fully digital product, no shipping cost, to us that just seemed really unfair that, why are people having to pay so much? So we came in at a much lower price point, but we also disrupted the industry, I guess, a bit by our compliance approach. And that's one of the things that, it has been a real strength for us. And we started out compliant just because we believed it was the right thing to do. A lot of our competitors weren't, and I think, and particularly globally, there was a lot of players that, just did not care about compliance, sort of anti-money laundering, all of that kind of thing was not at all on their, something that they were concerned about, complying with. For us, we believed in doing that from day one, and it's in the long run become a competitive advantage for us. But at the time, it was a bit of an outlier move to be going down that route.
How did you afford to charge lease?
We just were super lean. Like the business in the early days was my brother and I, and we automated everything. So that, I think, was a real secret. I think some of our competitors were manually processing orders. So of course, if you're having to pay people to sit there and punch things into a computer, that's going to cost. Whereas for us, everything we built, and from day one, it was one of our core principles, was automate everything.
Interesting. And you mentioned your brother, who's your co-founder. Yeah. Obviously, that didn't start that way. Like you had the idea. Who had the idea first?
No, it was his idea. So okay. This is a great story, actually. I have told the story before, but I'll just tell it briefly if you don't mind.
Yeah, and tell me anything that you haven't told anybody else before.
This one, unfortunately, is on record many times, but it's kind of a funny one. So my brother, he was buying crypto for himself, for his friends, family, and was thinking, this is a bit of a pain. I'm having to do all of these things for other people because it's too hard for them. I know how to do it, but it's just, I should be able to automate this. I should make it easier. So he sat down and he first Googled to find out what language people were coding in. He taught himself how to code. And within 5 days, he had built the first version of the website.
What?
Crazy. And we've double checked this. We've gone and looked at the code commits, looked at when he started this thing, and it was like, 5 days from start to, well, not finish, but start to MVP.
So he coded the website or coded the app?
So we didn't have an app, but it was a website front end where people could place orders, and then it was a back end trading infrastructure. So he coded both of those in 5 days. And, it was pretty simple. It was
What was his background?
He had been in IT administration, but he'd never coded.
Okay.
But again, right, it's like, and this is, I think, a really great lesson for entrepreneurs is like, don't be afraid of what you don't know, because everything is learnable. Yeah. And particularly, he sat down, he got a course on Udemy and, taught himself to code. You can, watch YouTube videos, you can get AI to explain things to you. There's so many ways to learn. And most subjects, are actually really learnable. Even things like coding, if it seems,
So he had to code because he wanted to have his own custom.
Yeah, he wanted to automate what he had been doing manually. So he'd been manually buying cryptocurrency for friends, and he wanted to just have a website. They could come to it, put in their order, pay their money, and then it would process.
Okay.
And so he built this thing, and then he put it on the internet, and then before he knew it, like strangers, people he had never met before, were using his site to buy crypto through him. And he tells me about this, and I'm like, I'm not sure that that's legal.
Yeah.
I was like, there's probably some sort of, rules, financial market thingies that we need to be thinking about. So I made him take it offline, and then we spent the next month or two getting all of the compliance in place, all of the legal, accounting, customer support, like all of the stuff that goes around running a business, apart from just pure product. So he started with pure product, and then I sort of came on week 2 with all of the other infrastructure you need.
Why did you think that was the right move as a co-founder?
To be honest, my very first motivation was to keep him out of jail. So I was like, I don't think you can do this. Let me help you. And then it quickly became apparent that we just had a really beautiful set of complementary skills. So everything he wanted to do, like, I understand code, I can read it, but like, I don't want to write it. That bores me silly. Whereas for him, he doesn't want to deal with people. So things like, compliance and dealing with accountants and lawyers and customers and marketing was not his jam. So we kind of had this really nice complementary skill sets that didn't overlap very much, which is great for a founding team.
Yeah. And how did you like grow together as co-founders? What is the relationship like at the start, and what is the relationship like midpoint, and then at the end? How different did it look like?
That is a great question, and one I have not been asked before, but we definitely had a lot of changes. So, when we very, very first started, it was his business and I came on to help him. And we even had, when we set up the company, it was 55% equity for him, 45 for me, in recognition of that was his idea that he started. We quickly moved to 50-50 in recognition of the fact that we were both putting in 100% or 200%. And then in those early years, it was just the two of us. We had a few contractors. We maybe got our first employee after sort of 18 months or so. But it was really the two of us working really hard and just knuckling down and putting all of our efforts into building and growing this thing. After we sort of probably went through another transition when we got our Series A funding. So part of what we fundraised for was to replace our tech stack. So Alan had built our entire tech stack himself, sort of like a one-man coding band with no experience and no formal training in how to write code and how to architect and engineer. And so we set out to replace that tech stack. And as part of that, we got a CTO on board, which really changed the dynamic quite a lot from, the two of us being sort of like equal partners to me being the CEO, someone else being the CTO, and Alan being sort of an advisor on the side. And it's, I guess, an important thing for founders to think about is like not just like, finding a co-founder, because I do recommend having a co-founder if you can, because the journey is just so hard. And I don't know, like I have grown heaps in resilience through doing this, but I would never have kept going if it wasn't for the obligation I felt to my co-founder to keep going. And similarly for him, he wouldn't have kept going if it wasn't for me. So co-found if you can, but recognize that your roles might change over time. And those early discussions, particularly around who's going to be the CEO, that was something we had a lot of discussion about because it was his idea and his business initially. which I think made us both think that he should be the CEO. But about a year or two in, we realized that actually my skill sets are CEO skill sets and his are not. And it's not necessarily a reflection on him or his capabilities. It's just that is a particular type of role that suits a certain person. And then, the dynamic changed again when we got a CTO and he sort of shifted out a bit. And then in the last year or so of the company, he's been not as involved, whereas particularly going through the sale process, for me, that has been a huge, huge undertaking and something that I've, it's turned me grey, and, I've been working night and day on that and huge amounts of stress, whereas it wasn't really something he was able to help me lift that load on. It was just a really, again, different skill set and different time in the business.
In terms of having a big vision, you were talking about it's important to have a co-founder because it makes life so much simpler. And I loved actually what you were talking about, just about the obligation, like you want to keep going because of somebody else.
Yeah.
Sounds like a marriage and children. I want to keep going for the children.
Co-founders are partners,
I
like
love
husband
that.
and wife teams.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful depth to your relationship with the people that you worked with, because there's a real sense of like depth, like it's just not just for me, like it's a partnership and both people or three people need to have that same crazy desire to make something work. It's a real willingness, and it sounds like that you had that, and I love it. Big, hairy, audacious goal, and you you had that at the start. How important is it to dream big, do you think? And were you dreaming big at the start and then in the middle and at the end? Did that change throughout?
I think it's really important, that whole thing of, if you don't have goals, if you don't know where you're headed, you're not going to get there, right? So we set out, my background, or my recent background, had been in strategy. And so when we first started the company, it was, I think, month 2, we sat down and worked on our 5-year goals. And that's where our big, hairy, audacious goal of, 1 billion in revenue came from. And at that stage, we thought that was completely unachievable for 2 kids starting a, something business in their garage effectively.
Yeah.
But we broke it down from 5-year goals into 3-year goals, 1-year goal, 90-day goals. And then we really focused on, the whole sort of remit of like, what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? What do we need to be achieving? What are the metrics we're going to measure ourselves against? And how do we keep ourselves on track for those goals? And we hit the, in hindsight, some of our metrics were a little bit misaligned. Like, I think we didn't achieve our number of customer metric until year 4, but we achieved our revenue metric in year 2. So, overachieving in revenue, underachieving in customer count, because we hadn't quite got those ratios right. But the overall principle is we knew where we were headed, and we broke it down into milestones to get there, and we really measured ourselves on it.
Did you get help? Did someone help you do that? Or were you just sat down and did it yourselves?
No, I mean, we could have done it ourselves, but for things like that, it's always, it's nice to have a facilitator.
Yeah.
Depends on your style. But one of my brother's really good friends is Logan Wedgwood, amazing guy, facilitator, and runs an advisory company. So we've had him come in sort of quite regularly and help us, run those sessions. Yeah.
So almost like a business coach kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that change your business? How important was that for you? Because you were just saying, it is important at the start, at the beginning, in the middle, and then at the end. For people who want to do what you're doing, that 22-year-old who don't have connections and networks, how can they go about getting that expert advice or help at the start?
This is one of the awesome things about starting a business in New Zealand, is there are so many programs out there to support. So things like Ministry of Awesome, where I work as an entrepreneur in residence, has a bunch of startup programs. You can join the Startup Accelerator, get a mentor for free. Callaghan, NZTE, there's probably, so many that I could name, which all have ways for startups to get free help. And I think that's really awesome. So take advantage of the opportunities and the programs that are out there. And also, do use your network. Like, I appreciate when you're young, you're starting out, you might not have a big network, but do invest in your network, go to events, meet people, talk to people, think about who that might know someone that could help you, because I cannot underplay how valuable networks are, and particularly in a country like New Zealand, which is 2 degrees of separation. Everything you need can be unlocked within your network,
so
even
true.
if you have a small network.
It's so true, isn't it? Everyone knows everybody here.
Yeah.
And if you have 8,000, 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, that's pretty much the whole business community.
Exactly.
Right? And you're like, I don't know who else to connect with. I just to go overseas. And I was going to ask you about the exit, but the exit we probably should do it a bit later on. When you're thinking about solving a problem, I'm going to quote here, you seized the obvious opportunity to make entering and trading in crypto market easy for everyday Kiwis. So you're like a bit of like the Sharesies site for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. How did you nail the problem solution fit? How did you get there?
We started by solving a problem that we had, and I think that's such a good way for businesses to start, because if it's your problem, you understand it. And if you have that problem, chances are other people will as well. So we started with, it is very hard to buy crypto in New Zealand and it is expensive. Let's solve that. And then we had some really key principles around how we designed our solution. We wanted it to be fast and we wanted it to be easy. And like we were obsessed about those things. Like, you know, my brother had our website load speeds down to like fractions of a millisecond, and like, you know, real obsessive around things that impact customer experience. Similarly with the ease of experience, like we're wanting like what are the fewest number of clicks we can put a customer through? What's the least amount of information we can make them, you know, absorb? What's the smoothest way we can do this journey? And also, what are the things they're already used to? Like one of the things that I see product designers do that, you know, I personally think is a bit of a mistake is being new and different and unusual, whereas people have certain mindsets they're already trained in, and it's easier if you work with the way that they already know how things work. You know, like when you're designing a car, you don't put the reverse stick, you know, you don't put B for backwards, you put R for reverse, because every other car uses R for reverse. So, you know, just stick with what people know, because it's familiar and it helps them move through the experience faster.
And you reckon that really helped you out?
Yeah, I think really focusing, particularly in the early days, speed and ease were just like, you know, relentless focuses of ours.
In terms of like seeing a need in the market, did you go out and did research, talk to people, or because you didn't do that?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. Is I've built 2 products. Well, I've built a few, but 2 main ones. And the first one we did not test or market research at all. We just built it. We built it for ourselves, and then other people found it, loved it, used it, recommended it, and that's how we grew really organically. The second product I built, I had this great idea, and I came up with it all by myself and sort of did all these things that I thought make sense, and then got my team to build it, and I did not test it. And, you know, there was maybe 70% of my idea was good, but there was a large chunky 30% that just didn't work for people. They didn't understand it, or they didn't have the same belief system I had about they didn't want the same things that I wanted. And I didn't test that product. And so it was a really interesting one for me, having both experiences as a founder of just, you know, run your own thing and see what happens, and having that work versus doing it and seeing in hindsight the real flaws of that. So I think there is a time for both, but you don't want to. You need to have a bit of a leap of faith, particularly when you're building something new. That whole adage of, you know, if you ask people what they want, they'll say faster horses. You can't always ask customers what they want, because A, they don't know, or B, they can't think of, you know, solutions that they haven't seen. But at the same time, if you do stuff without testing at all, that's, you know, a bit of hubris there, and it can fail, as I found the hard way through my second round.
Quickly, AI is here and it's disrupting all of us, disrupting our work, our play, and our businesses. You either learn about it and know how to apply, or you get left behind. Simple as that. So my friends at Academy X are running 10-week masterclass called Disruptive Technologies. It is going to teach you how to use AI and tech to shape your future and to walk away with skills that you can use immediately at work. This is so important to stay ahead of the curve, something that we talk about a lot on the show. So why wait? Click the link in the description and sign up. The course begins August 19th. Okay, back to the episode. In terms of customers and sales, I just want to get an idea of how were you able to acquire customers and retain them?
One of the greatest questions for all business entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
For us, it was quite challenging, particularly at the beginning. When we started Easy Crypto, we were banned from advertising online. So we couldn't advertise on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram.
How come?
Google ads, because we were crypto.
Okay.
And it's still really challenging for crypto companies to advertise. So one of the things that really grates me is that scammers seem to manage to get around these rules, whereas legitimate companies like ours, it is such a challenge. But back in 2018, 2019, when we started, it was just a flat blanket ban. There was no crypto advertising allowed at all, even if you're regulated, licensed, all of that. So we started with really a lot of in-person engagement, either going to community events in person or joining communities online, Discord, Facebook groups, and having word of mouth, starting with ourselves, being really visible in the community. And I think it really worked well for our industry because it's an industry where there was a lot of a trust gap. People wanted to get involved, but they didn't know where to start. They didn't know who to trust. And having that knowledge that, hey, there's someone local here. They live in my country. I've met them face to face. That gave people the confidence to use our services. And then once they'd use them, they would recommend them to others. And we got a lot of traction through word of mouth.
I'm quite interested in one section there. We talked about social groups, Facebook groups. What did you do? Did you just join a group and just said, hey, I'm Janine, I'm the Easy Crypto co-founder, let me tell you about it? How do you do that?
Yeah, I've got an interesting story about this. So firstly, you don't do that, right? You don't, in crypto, we call it shilling, where someone just comes and recommends their own product. And that's a really easy way to get banned. It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't
So
work.
what I did is I joined those groups and I was there offering advice, support when people said, how do I merge this token on this network? Or, how do I know, I would just be answering people's questions and just be visible and present as an expert in the community and someone who is helpful. And I was actively trying not to push my own product, but just to be known, active, helpful. And over time, people would start doing the recommending for me.
Gotcha.
In this one particular group, though, I'd been doing that role for a while, like maybe 2 months. And then someone said, where do I buy crypto in New Zealand? And I was like, well, I've got the answer to this.
Yeah.
So I said, my website, here's the link. You can buy crypto through my website. And I immediately got banned from the group. And I reached out to the administrator and I was like, hey, I've been in this group for a while. Have a look at my posts. I'm, trying to be a really helpful part of the community. And that was genuinely the right answer for this question. Can you tell me why you banned me?
Yeah.
And I ended up having a chat to this administrator for a while and I explained to him what we did and how our business worked. And he was like, can I open Easy Crypto in Australia? And that's how we got our Australian business manager.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, don't you hate when you get banned?
Yeah, but I was willing to challenge it. And that's actually probably another lesson that I've learnt through entrepreneurship that I've only just recently realized and reflected on is that I tend not to take no for an answer, or at least not that I'll be like up in people's face and be like, no, you can't say no, but like I'll always ask why. Like if someone says no, or in this case kicks me out of a group, I'll try to understand why, because understanding the why behind the no lets you navigate around it a lot of the time.
Well, you grew your customer base. Can you tell me about the steady growth, or the how did it grow? Did it year 1, year 2, year 3, your customers? What's the rate, and what did you end up having? How many customers in the end did you had on board?
Yeah, so we've got around 250,000 customers now. It started so much slower than that, but I remember the milestones of an early stage business feel so big when you're going through them.
Yeah.
There's this really beautiful magazine article on the wall of my mum and dad's house. It was the first magazine article that we were featured in. And so they framed it and put it on the wall. And every time I see it, it cracks me up because there's this one line in there that it talks about how after 18 months, we've turned over 10 million in sales. And we were like, amazing. Like that was a huge number.
Yeah.
That was in 2019. And then within a year, COVID hit, and COVID was just such an incredible boom time for us. And during COVID, and even, now, we'll have days where we do 10 million in a single day. And so that sort of milestone that it took us 18 months to hit became a daily turnover later on. It was just like this exponential growth.
And how did you set your revenue model? You were thinking, what's the best way to decide on your revenue model? Do you go commission, or do you go like a set fee? But actually, okay, so before we get into that question, sorry, I do want to know, so 250,000 customers, and was it $4 billion worth of sales?
Yeah.
I'm sure other people started looking at and seeing what you were doing, having competition, because that's what entrepreneurs are going to face. Were you worried about that at all? Or were you like, no, we're pretty sweet, we're pretty foundational, all the fundamentals are there, no one can copy what we're doing right now?
In the when we first built Easy Crypto, we worried about insanely because you can't, like, tech isn't really, there's nothing to stop someone else copying your tech. And in fact, we found out that for the first 6 months, we had all of our source code published online because Alan had accidentally ticked the wrong box somewhere. So we were expecting any day now, any of our competitors to just completely replicate our business model. And, you know, there were people out there when we started that had bigger brands, more customers, and we're like, why aren't they doing what we're doing? To this day, I still don't know. But, you know, they didn't. Like, people didn't pick up on our, you know, the sort of quick, easy processing system we had. They didn't replicate our compliance approach. And those two things were what led to most of our competitors shutting down over the next couple of years. There were, of course, also the international competitors. And that's been an interesting one in that an unusual moat that we have had in New Zealand has been having access to a bank account. And that's not something that should really set a business apart. Like, that's kind of 101 of starting a business, is register on the company's office and set up a bank account. But in our industry, banking was very, very difficult and still is. And so that's been something that's been a slightly unusual moat that we've had.
Can you get into that? Because I don't quite understand. Like, so you're saying that you had a business account for your business, and that was... I don't get that.
Yeah, this is such a common reaction because people are like, sorry, what? But so when I started Easy Crypto, I was actually working at a bank, and I was like, well, this is easy. I'll just open a bank account for my new company. Yeah. And that bank where I was an employee said, no way.
But why?
Because we were crypto.
And they don't like crypto.
It was just...
competition?
No, I don't think it was a competitive thing. I think it was just, this industry is risky.
Right.
And the easiest answer is no.
And what did you do?
I asked every single bank in New Zealand multiple times. And then when all I got was no's going through the front door. So then I used my network. And again, this is the power of networks. I cannot understate it because my business would not be here without it. I went to my LinkedIn and I looked for any person that I knew who worked at a bank or had worked at a bank. And I just contacted them all and said, can you help introduce me to someone that I can talk to about opening a bank account?
Right.
And then I went to those people that I got introduced to and I was like, hey, this is my situation. And I sent them our compliance program because I think a lot of the reason that we were getting no's was banks just assumed that, you know, all of our competitors that had tried getting bank accounts didn't know compliance or didn't do any compliance processes. So I started with, here's my 60-page compliance program as part of my introduction so that people would take us seriously.
Yeah.
And eventually I found someone who, they didn't say yes, but they said, I'll find out why it's a no. And again, going back to that thing of not taking no as an answer is like, the key thing you need to do is understand what's behind the no. If you can find out why it's a no, then you can navigate it. And so they said, I'll find out why it's a no. And I was like, that is good enough for me. And then, and that was with KiwiBank, and they gave us a bank account after they got to know us. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, I'm big props to KiwiBank that they looked at us and they look at businesses as individuals and as opportunities, not just numbers and risk.
That is profound, isn't it? I love that. And I love how, you keep going. You don't say no. I mean, if you get a no, you're just going to keep going.
Yeah.
I love that. It's a bit of a cool trait. How did you show investors that you had a product market fit? Because you had to go out and get money. Now that your competitors, you were scared about your competitors, but like you were still going and no one seemed to have copied you. And in New Zealand, were you the only company that was doing what you were doing? No one else was doing it?
No, when we started, there were maybe 7 or 8 places you could buy crypto.
Right.
One of them was a similar model to us, which was kind of a purchase and checkout model rather than a custodial model. So with crypto, there's sort of 2 ways that people do crypto. One is an exchange where firstly you top up with money, then secondly you trade your money for crypto, and then thirdly you withdraw your crypto if you want to take it off the exchange. So it's kind of like a 3-step process. And during the middle of that process, all your funds are sitting on the exchange and at risk with, you know, what happened with Cryptopia or FTX. Then there's our model, which operates more like a retail shop that you go, hey, I want to put some Bitcoin in my cart. Here's my address to send it to. You pay for it, you check out, and you get the Bitcoin. So when we started, both of those models existed. interestingly, over time, the whole industry has moved towards really just the exchange model. And in hindsight, we backed the wrong model in that the exchange model is actually a lot more profitable. There's, different ways that you can make money. Customers are stickier because you're holding their funds. But the philosophical approach that we took was we do not want to hold people's funds. We don't want to be that honeypot for hacks. This was around the time when the Cryptopia hack happened, which was, a huge New Zealand-based crypto company that got taken for hundreds of millions of dollars. And we also philosophically believe that people should be holding their own funds, because that was kind of like the ethos behind cryptocurrency is you're in control of your own money. No one else can take it off you, or, governments, institutions don't have ability to control it. It's yours. So that was why we went with that model. In hindsight, it was the wrong horse to back, but I don't know that I would have done that differently, just because, the reasons that we made that decision were the right reasons. But, hindsight's 2020, right?
Quick one. Mina here. Thank you for watching this episode. I appreciate you. Thank you for all your support. One thing that you can do for me is to please hit the subscribe button below. I promise you that if you hit subscribe, I'm going to work hard to make sure that my episodes are really good, that will get better and better. So, do we have a deal? Okay, back to the episode. Yeah, so in terms of you've grown the company and you had that many people, 250,000 people signed up. And this is New Zealand and Australia, or global as well? Did you go global?
Yeah, we're also in South Africa.
Okay. So did the US market had any interest in what you guys were doing? Or were there such big players in there that it's hard to crack that market?
There was a couple of things. One is that we wanted to go to the global south because, so many companies, when they expand, they're like Europe, UK, US, Canada, and we're like, the south always gets overlooked.
Yeah.
And also with what we were working with, like cryptocurrency has this ethos around democratizing finance, giving everyone equal opportunities. And I loved that for countries where perhaps a lot of people have been cut out of things like wealth creation. And you also have countries where local currencies are not the most stable, not the most trustworthy. So a lot of opportunity, I believe, for crypto in the global south. And also, we're part of the global south, so let's, help our neighbours out. US as well had two other challenges. One is a huge amount of competitors there because everyone goes to the US because it's such a big market. And secondly, a huge amount of complexity with regulation. So you had the SEC providing very unclear regulation around crypto. You have, different laws taking place in different states. You can't really see it as one country, right? It's more like 50 odd countries. So there are a lot of reasons why the US just wasn't that appealing to us.
Yeah. In terms of the uptake for cryptocurrency, because that's a little segue to more questions about what's happening with crypto right now. What's the attitude of New Zealanders to cryptocurrency? Are they open to it? Are they skeptical? What are they thinking?
Increasingly open. So I think our latest survey, which was actually last year, was that 40% of New Zealanders either had or were considering crypto as an investment. We estimate that New Zealanders hold between $7 and $10 billion of crypto, which is when you compare that to the size of the NZX, it's actually quite significant. And it's an increasingly adopted asset class.
Well, and so because crypto is so volatile.
Yeah.
I mean, when I hear crypto and Bitcoin, I hear ups and downs and volatility. And some people swear by it and other people go, I'll never be a part of that. So what's the truth?
I mean, I feel like saying I will never is not a great investment strategy, but at the same time, absolutely you need to be aware of the risk, right? So not financial advice, but I would never encourage anyone to put into crypto more than they're willing to lose. It's a high risk asset, right? Well, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and the, your altcoins are high risk, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't form part of a diversified investment portfolio. So sort of a general rule of thumb is, up to 5% for sort of wary investors, maybe up to 10% for people who are a bit more bullish in cryptocurrency, but, definitely the idea of remortgaging the house and chucking all in Bitcoin is probably a bad idea.
Yeah. So what does it have those spikes, ups and downs, really crazy ups and downs in crypto?
So one of the interesting things about crypto is that it's incredibly liquid and it's 24/7 traded. So one thing that I've noticed is, stock markets, currency markets will be closed on weekends. They're still old school, they're still analog. They trade Monday to Friday, 8 till 10 or whatever. And cryptocurrency, though, is 24/7 and it's global. So when something happens, when there is a missile strike in the Middle East, when there is a tariff announcement on a Sunday, the crypto markets will respond real time instantly to that because they can. And so they do look more volatile, but they're also actually more active and more liquid 24/7, which gives them a bit of a superpower.
I like the superpower, but at the same time, it has been described as a Wild West. And it's probably in 2016 or 2015 when you started. Was it more Wild West than it is right now?
100%. Like when I first bought crypto, there was no need for KYC. You know the process.
What's KYC?
So KYC stands for Know Your Customer, which is when you sign up with a financial service, a bank, an insurer, anything like that, and you have to give your ID and they do some checks on you. That process has been in place for financial services for years and years now, and it's only just started to come in for crypto providers over the last probably 5 years. So definitely there were aspects of the industry that did not have the same level of compliance as you'd expect from financial services, the same level of prudential supervision, of, financial market conduct, of customer protection. And I think those things are really important. Like if retail investors, if everyday people are buying cryptocurrencies, they should be able to expect the same level of responsibility and protection from the providers that you would with any other financial service.
And what does that mean for the sector? More regulation?
Yeah, probably. I mean, New Zealand's been pretty good in this regard. Like, from day one, we've been doing KYC and anti-money laundering things. We've been registered as a financial service provider. We have, formal processes around dispute resolution, all of those things. For customers who are based in New Zealand but using offshore providers, though, it's a bit hit and miss. You might have a provider that's got processes in place, but if they're registered in the Bermudas or the Bahamas or in Tajikistan, are you going to have the right, recourses that you need? So it is a bit buyer beware still, but it's something that's definitely improving.
Is it like a country by country trust level situation? Like in New Zealand, if you are trading with easy crypto, there are more chances of it being legit because of the regulations and the adherence to the rules than other countries that are maybe still Wild Westy.
Yeah, just as a general rule of thumb, for New Zealanders, you shouldn't be making financial investments with companies that are not registered in New Zealand. So offshore companies can register here, and there are international crypto companies that are registered in New Zealand. But if you're going with a company that is no link to New Zealand, isn't complying with New Zealand regulations, it's at your own risk.
We were going to talk a little bit about the exit. You had mentioned it in another podcast. But your exit had a little bit to do with the regulation. You were talking about it being a little bit more regulated now. I'll let you fill us in with what's happening with crypto right now in terms of that regulation and how is it impacting the sector. Is it making it more costly? Is it making it more difficult to operate as a business? Is that why you actually ended up selling the business in the first place?
It was definitely one of the factors that weighed in. We're seeing an increasing wave of costs coming through from regulatory compliance. We've had a lot of new regulations come in around travel rule, around tax crypto asset reporting framework, around PTR, STR filing, around different layers of compliance. But also cybersecurity is getting more complex and costly. The crypto industry itself is becoming a lot more complex. You're having increasing numbers of networks, increasing range of cross-network chains, bridges, all of these different kind of crypto things that they increase complexity for our tech stack, for our customer support team, for our compliance costs. So we were of the view that to manage, one of the factors leading into the decision to exit was that those costs are better borne at a larger, more economies of scale if you're a larger company. And so merging with a larger entity enabled us to better absorb those costs and also enabled us more growth and expansion opportunity.
So now that you've exited, are you still part of the company? Do you still operate, or once you exited, that's it, thanks so much, I'm moving on to my next project?
No, I'm still working with Easy Crypto. So,
Gotcha.
we've obviously got a big transition roadmap ahead of us in terms of merging, our customers, our products, policies, staff, everything with Swyftx. And so that's a really important thing that, I'm staying involved in to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible for customers and for the staff.
Because I know that you, the exit details, some of it is private in terms of the deal, how much that was. But can you give us an indication as to the significance of that exit for you guys? Like, were you expecting it? How easy did that exit come into place? Like, how did the whole Swyftx deal come about?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. We initially started looking at exiting at the end of 2023. We'd been approached by an overseas listed company around a potential acquisition, and we looked at that seriously. And when I say we, this is the board. The board looked seriously at that, decided the deal wasn't compelling enough for us to take it, but it kind of created the catalyst for this is probably the right time for us to look at what's happening in the market. We were expecting crypto to pick up in 2024, which it did, albeit later than we expected. We were seeing trends towards consolidation in the industry, and of course also these rising costs. So we started a process at that point we engaged advisors, we went out to market to look for potential acquirers, had a couple of offers come through, assessed those, and then ended up going with Swyftx as the best deal.
Well, it's really exciting. And I want to get into real quick about how, looking back, what are some of the biggest decisions that you've made for this business to work? Like the best decision that you've made, that you over and over think that was so good. I'm so glad I did that one decision. I'm sure there were many, heaps, but the best one out of them all.
Tough question.
Definitely one of the best ones I would think of is when your brother learned how to code.
Yeah.
I mean, that was such a door opener to everything. But for you, in terms of biggest decision, and also in terms of the biggest mistake, I'm sure you've made a lot of good decisions that led to good things, but also mistakes.
I mean, I think if I'm looking at the best decision and the biggest mistake, probably the answer is the same, is around hiring, he tangata. And I think some of the things that have helped us move forward the fastest, created the most momentum and great outcomes have been some really good hiring, particularly at the exec level.
Yeah.
And the thing that has created the most destruction, erosion of value, mental load for me, and just absolute turmoil has been bad hires. So it's such a challenging one. And at Electrify Aotearoa last week, we had some great sessions on how to hire well and also what to do when hiring hasn't gone well. But it's a really hard lesson for startups to learn. One thing that I would do differently going forwards is I would never hire a senior person or a direct report without having taken them out for a meal. I think there's only so far you can get to know someone through interviews, and there's only so far you can get to know through someone, at all until you really road test them. However, sitting in a relaxed setting, just talking with someone, it helps you get to know them a bit better. And I think there are definitely decisions I would have done differently had I had that kind of informal catch up with someone before I hired them.
What about biggest? We would say the biggest mistake would be hiring. Yeah. And was it costly for your business?
Incredibly costly in terms of lost traction, spending a lot of resources moving in the wrong direction, impact on culture, and also just like the absolute distraction of having to deal with someone who's, kind of running in this direction while you want the company to be going that way. Yeah.
And then you're spending time and energy to bring them back into position.
Yeah.
And in terms of final advice for, it's such a hard question because you've been giving us advice all along. But in terms of just when you're thinking about your why, like there's something that's helping you get up and do this every day. And I want to know what that is because I have a book on the shelf that starts with why. So I love for you to tell me what is your why and how can people continue to stick with their why. Keep going.
It is such a great question, and it's something that I possibly had a bit of a different experience on, in that my why when I started the business, my why was helping my brother out.
Of jail.
Pretty much, get me out of jail. And then over time it transitioned into, I had this real deep belief in the ability of cryptocurrency to improve people's lives, particularly around wealth generation and wealth management. And I think, again, like we touched on the beginning, right? As a young child, my parents taught me the value of money, and it's really set my life up well. And I wanted, I thought cryptocurrency had the ability to help transform other people's lives and create, financial well-being for so many people. That was the why when I was growing and scaling the business, but the industry over time didn't really deliver on that why. And I sort of got to the later years of Easy Crypto and realized that what I was facilitating was speculation and scams. And, there's nothing wrong with speculation. I have, people come up to me all the time and say, thanks to Easy Crypto, I got a deposit on my house, or I bought a car, or I got out of debt. And I'm like, that's awesome. Okay. The scams are like absolutely soul destroying, and I hate that aspect of it. But neither of those things were what my why was. So I was running a business where what I had gotten into it for and then what I had continued in it for were not being delivered. And, for me, my why then became around the culture that I was building. And we have an amazing culture at Easy Crypto. Like consistently 90, 95, 98% of people say that they enjoy the work that they do and they're proud to work there. And that was so important for me, because I never wanted to create a company that people don't want to get out of bed on a Monday and go to work, right? Work is such a big part of our lives that I was like, as an employer, I want this to be a real value add for people, make their lives better. So I had to change my why multiple times over the Easy Crypto journey, some of it from internal factors and some of it from external. And I don't know if that's a common thing for founders to go through. I'd love to know how other people's experiences are, but maybe there is something about needing to be flexible in your why, because you have to have one, right? Like I couldn't get out of bed for work every day if it wasn't delivering on my why. But over time it definitely changed.
Evolved. Before we end the episode, how can people reach out to you if they'd like to have a chat or learn more about you and your work and Easy Crypto?
Hit me up on LinkedIn, mention you've watched this podcast, and let me know how I can help.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Janine. You've been, awesome, so inspiring and profoundly inspiring to me and your story. And thank you for continuing to say no to no.
It's a great lesson, that one. And thank you for the insightful questions. Like I really love the chat. There's lots of really great questions and insights.